Hello everyone, welcome to Best Practices from Migrating to Magnolia 5. We're very glad you could join us today. I'm Zach Grant, Magnolia's Technical Evangelist. Our presenter today is Nicola Barbe. Nicola is a Senior Consultant at Magnolia. He's been involved in 7 different migrations in a variety of roles. Today, he'll be sharing our best practices on migration, as well as walking you through the process and answering your questions after the webinar. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, all the attendees are muted. However, this doesn't mean that you can't ask questions. Please feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll do our best to answer them during the question and answer session at the end. A day or two after the webinar, we'll post a video recording of the presentation, as well as the presentation slides. You'll get an email with the links and other supporting materials. If you have questions after the webinar, we encourage you to take them to the Magnolia forums. That's it for housekeeping. Thanks again for coming. I'll hand it over to Nicola now.
Thank you, Zach. So I'm Nicolas Barbe. I'm Senior Consultant in Magnolia, and I will guide you today through the migration process and try to explain you in details what means this migration and how to go to Magnolia 4 to Magnolia 5. So first of all, let's talk about the agenda. So I will briefly explain why you should make the move to Magnolia 5, and then I will provide you some details about the kind of services that you can expect from Magnolia, as well as then we will see a quick overview of the migration, and we will go through some recommendations, very basic recommendations, and then we will now clearly enter into the migration process, explaining the 2 main phases of the migration. The first one, the migration from Magnolia 4.4 to 4.5, and the second one from Magnolia 4.5 to Magnolia 5. So why you have to make the move to Magnolia 5? It's mainly about new features. So as you already know, Magnolia 5 comes with a new intuitive interface which perfectly fits desktop or tablet devices. We also have this new app frameworks which is very useful to integrate deeply into Magnolia, a third-party system or any external system which provides external data. We also have the personalization, which allows you to create page variation based on the segmentation of the users. We also have a brand new workflow based on the GPPM standards, so fully customized workflow. And we have also a nice integration of the DAM, so our asset manager, so you can integrate through the CMIS protocol any type of system which manage assets. We also have a brand new REST API for integration purposes, and we also have what we call the JCR agnostic app, which is basically mean that you can integrate Magnolia with any type of data sources from, for instance, the file system or MongoDB or MySQL if you want. So regarding services that we can provide on the migration, so basically we have the 3 types of services. The first one is what we call an audit. So this is a document that we can provide to you which identify the main topics on your project which are concerned by the migration. So we provide also some ideas or approaches to help you to migrate, as well as to evaluate the difficulty and the size and the time needed for this migration. We have also a workshop, which is a nice way to really practice the migration on a predefined exercise from the beginning to the end, going through all the steps. And we provide also assistance. So, so basically, you have questions on migration, and we provide answer. Those 2 workshop and assistant migration, the audit is a prerequisite. So you have to first ask for an audit, and then we can provide a workshop or we can provide assistance. At the next conference, we will have a dedicated session, a dedicated workshop for the migration. And we also have free resources or on our official documentation or on the Academy. So clearly, before starting any migration project, the preparation is the key. The full process is divided actually in two distinct sub-processes. The first one, as I said, is the migration from Magnolia 4.4 to Magnolia 4.5. And the second one from Magnolia 4.5 to Magnolia 5, which means that basically you cannot do just one single migration from 4.4 to 5. You have to do those two distinct steps. The first migration is mainly impacted by, the first migration is impacted by new features that we have added to the front end. So a new security layer, some new concept in the STK, on the templating as well. So that the front end has changed, so you will have to migrate the front end side. And for the second migration to Magnolia 5, this is more the back end, which is concerned by the migration, since we have introduced this new user interface, as well as a DAM, as well as the concept of application, and a new layout for the dialogues. Before going into the details of the migration, I will give you some basic recommendations. So first, I recommend you to clean your data. So I mean, removing any obsolete content, but also it's very good to try to identify any data which are available in an external system. So you can just remove those data from Magnolia, do the migration, and import the data back into Magnolia once migration is done. The idea here is very simple. The less data you have in Magnolia, the quicker will be your migration, and also the risk will be lower. We recommend you also to build a test repository because running the migration on a huge database is clearly a source of, you will lose a lot of time. So building a test repository is really a good practice. There are different strategies to build a test repository. In the case of the migration, especially for the first phase, I suggest you to create an instance of each template and each component and each dialogue in the website and run the migration on top of this small website. Then, if you identify any use cases that was not managed by this test repository, it's very easy to enrich the test repository. So having a test repository is a good thing when you develop, when you implement the migration, but you should not wait the last moment to test your migration on a real production content. So as soon as you have something which works, just take the production content and try a migration. Any new issues that you identify through this production content must be reported into your test database. The migration is based on version handlers. We will see this later. So which means that you have to use version handlers in the project. If it's not the case, it's not a big issue. It's just a good time to start using this concept. Now we'll talk about recommendation on test strategies. So the first and basic, I would say, brute force test strategy is to crawl the website using a crawler, so you can automate the crawling of the website, going through all the pages, and then you take the logs file, Catalina out, and you try to identify any stack traces. Obviously, you should not have any stack traces. So if you have any stack traces, it means that that's an issue, and it's an easy way to identify potential issues. You should also involve your editors and end users as soon as possible in the project, especially with if you migrate to Magnolia 5. This is a big change for them, and if you involve them at the beginning, it's a good way to refine the initial requirements or try to define acceptance tests. Then at the end, when everything is ready, just before the go live, you can also run a test campaign involving again your end users. And the last recommendation, read the migration logs. So the migration, we produce a lot of logs, and it's really interesting, and it's a very good way to identify any potential issues. So please pay attention of logs, especially the one which are in warn or error level. So now it's time to explain the migration process itself. We will talk first about the first main step, which is migration from Magnolia 4.4 to 4.5. So we will go through, before and entering into the details, we will go through the main new features in Magnolia 4.5, which will have an impact on the migration. So we have introduced new features at the level of the templating engine, as well as new API, so new STK API, new Node API, and also we are using a different security layer. So first, regarding the templating mechanisms that we have introduced. The first main one is the concept of area, which is now explicit in Magnolia 4.5, which basically an area, just to explain what it is, it's just a part of your page where you can just decide which component you want to display. So this concept was already existed before in Magnolia 4.4, but now this mechanism is explicit. We have also additional tags such as CMS init, CMS area, and CMS components. So those are tags that you have to use in your framework templates and that will replace previous tags. We also have two new templating functions, CMSFN and STK which will replace the STK utils functions. And we have also made some structural changes in the template definition, so which means that basically all those changes will impact your template definitions, the scripts, as well as also your Java objects, so you will have to migrate them. So we have introduced a new API for the standard templating kit. Actually, it's not a new API. We have just added new functions. So there are some changes which are mandatory because we have introduced all those new concepts of area, pages, component. So we have some classes which are now deprecated, and we have for each those classes, we have a replacement. So this is fully described in the documentation. STK util as well is deprecated, and you have to use one of those classes, either STK templating function or templating functions. Again, all the equivalency between the deprecated class and its replacement is fully described in the documentation. Now in Magnolia 4.5, if you need to manipulate the GCR, so doing navigate across all the nodes, stuff like that, you have to use the Node jcr.Node API, which means that now the content API is now deprecated. So you have to migrate from the content API to the Node API. We provide also the equivalent call between the deprecated API and the new one. But if you think that this migration, this change in the code represents a lot of work, you have the choice to not put this task on the critical path of the migration, because even if the content API is deprecated, it is still available in Magnolia. So you can just postpone this task for later. We provide methods to switch from a node to a content node, and vice versa. We are now using the default security mechanism in the GCR, in Jackrabbit, so that it means that you will have to change the Jackrabbit settings. Now, so we have seen the new features in Magnolia 4.5 that will impact your migration. So now I will detail the migration process. So as you can see, when you move from Magnolia 4.4 to Magnolia 4.5, it's mostly a linear process, a step-by-step process, with an iterative phase in the middle. This iterative phase, as we will see later, is mandatory and concern essentially all the customizations that you have in your project. So first, some prerequisites. Your Magnolia instance must use at least Magnolia 4.4.6, but I suggest you to use always the latest Magnolia version before doing the migration. Which today is Magnolia 4.4.13. This has an impact when you will execute the migration on the production instances. You will have to first execute a migration from the old Magnolia 4.4.6 to 4.4.13, and then execute the real migration from 4.4.13 to 4.5. Now, here are the details regarding the changes that you have to do in the configuration. So first, you have to update all your POM files to specify the correct Magnolia version, and to update as well some module dependencies and update some artifacts and group identifiers. This is clearly explained in the documentation, which artifacts, which group ID, and which version you have to use. Then if you try to build your project, you will see that you will have some build errors, which are mainly due to this deprecated code that we have, that I have explained just before. So now you will have to replace, thanks to the documentation, you know which replacement to use. Or also there are some inputs in the Java doc that you can use. Once it's done and that your project compile successfully, you will have to update your module descriptor to reflect the changes that you have done in the POM files. And then you have the last task, which consists in adding to your version handler the migration task that will concretely migrate the definition, the content, and we will see later what you will have to do after. So we have two types of tasks. The first one, which will migrate the content, is called content module migration task. And the second one, which will migrate your definition. We have one which must be used if you are using STK, and the other which must be used if you are not using STK. Once it's done, you will have to update the security definition in the Webapp, so the Jackrabbit and JS configuration, and also to update the web.xml file. We provide a script that you can use to automate this phase. This is clearly useful if you have several instances in production. It's better to use a script and automate fully these changes. Now, it's time to do a backup of the repository and use this backup for the rest of the process. This is really important because if you use another backup before those modifications, the migration won't work. So please use always this backup. So now you can start Magnolia. So what is happening? Each Magnolia module will be automatically migrated, and your module will be partially migrated. We have just remember what we have done in the previous steps. We have added one task to migrate the content, one task to migrate the definition, but your template scripts are not migrated. So this is the purpose of the step 4, to use a dedicated tool to help you to migrate the template script. So in Magnolia 4.5, we have a tool which is called the template migration tool, that you can run and you just provide the path to where are your template scripts in your project. You run the tool and it will modify the template script dynamically, and also it can update the template definition. If the tool thinks it's relevant, it will update the template definition. So nothing is magic. The migration tool only migrates the patterns that we have identified, so I would say standard patterns which correspond to our best practices. if you have some specificities or customizations, the tool won't be able to migrate them. We have also a migration report, which is automatically generated. Some more, this is the step 5. So to work on the delta, so basically to work on all the things which were not migrated successfully by the automated phase. So it's an iteration. So you will have to go through each page, try to identify what is wrong and fix what is wrong. So you have 4 possibilities. Either the problem comes from the template script itself, so you will have to fix the FTL, or it comes from the configuration, so you update the template definition, for instance, or it can come from the content itself, so you will have to fix the content. Once it's fixed, don't forget to update the version handlers to automate this modification. It can also be due to your code, so in that case, update your code. Now it's time to test. So at this point, you can use the production content, and then you can use one of the test strategies that we have seen previously, either crawling and comparing the result of the page before and after the migration. You can also execute acceptance tests, or you can run a manual test campaign with your end users. If there is any issue, you just add the use case to the test repository and go back to step 5 and enrich the version handler. This is really important to base everything in the version handler. The version handler are the way to automate the migration and to not perform any manual task on the production environment. Now it's time to finalize the migration. So don't forget to update the bootstraps in your project. So you export the configuration. You can also export some sample files if you need. We provide some scripts that you can use to automate or to simplify this phase. And once it's done, you can just build and release your project. Now you are ready to deploy the project on production. So it was the first migration phase from Magnolia 4.4 to Magnolia 4.5. Now I will explain the second phase from Magnolia 4.5 to Magnolia 5. But before entering the details, I will just go through the main new features which will impact the migration. So as I said previously, this second phase will mainly impact the back end, so the author instance, because we have introduced a new definition of the dialog. The DAM will replace the DMS. We have also metadata now are implemented as a Mixin, and we have also the concept of content app as well as a new workflow engine. So the dialog definition has changed. So it's now a new structure, as you can see, before in Magnolia 4.5 and after in Magnolia 5. So quickly, what has changed? The actions now are at the same level as the form itself, and now the tabs are clearly part of the dialog. So all those changes, you will have to migrate them, and we provide a task that will help you to do this modification. If you are using Blossom, you will have also to change your code to reflect these changes. The digital asset management is a new tool in Magnolia 5, which allows you to centrally manage all the assets. So it comes with its own workspace, which is called the DAM. And the big change is that all assets are centrally stored, which means that you cannot have any assets, any image, any picture inside the website or attached to a data. The way we represent metadata has changed, so that's a technical change basically, but it means that on all nodes in Magnolia, you will have, we have a task hopefully that will do that job for you, that will change the structure of the metadata from the way it is in Magnolia 4.5 to the way it is in Magnolia 5. The data module also now has been replaced by the concept of content app. So now the content app is the recommended way to manage data in Magnolia 5. We provide tasks that will automatically migrate all your data type into an app in Magnolia 5. So this is fully automated. We also have this new workflow engine based on GBPM that will replace the old one, which was based in OpenWFE. In that case, we do not provide any tool to do this migration, so you will have to manually migrate, to recreate the workflow in Magnolia 5 using GBPM. If you are using the standard Magnolia workflow, you don't have to do anything since we provide the equivalent one in Magnolia 5. So now we will talk about the migration process. In that case, the migration process is almost like any standard Magnolia upgrade. It's done in 3 steps. First, you update the project. Then you have to complete the version handler to call the migration task, and then you just need to test and deploy. But before you need to satisfy the following prerequisites. So again, it's always good to use the latest Magnolia version. So in that case, it's Magnolia 4.5.23. And also if you are using Tomcat, you must use that version in the slide as well. So now the first step is to update the project itself. So you have to update the POM files to use the latest Magnolia 5.3.5. You don't need to specify any versions in the dependencies, because now in Magnolia 5 we are using the dependency management, and we can and we know which version to use thanks to Maven, which can automatically take the version from the underlying dependencies. You will have to update some artifact and group identifiers. So everything here is described also in the documentation. Some API, there are some changes in the API, so you might have to change some code. For instance, since now the DMS does not exist anymore, we have a new API for the DAM, so you will have to move from the old DMS API to the new DAM API. You will have also to change your module descriptor to reflect the changes that you have done in the POM file, and now you can start. So you will have at the end a Magnolia instance up and running, but your module won't be migrated at all. For that, you will have to use your module version handler and add some migration task. And as you can see, we provide for each individual task, individual step of the migration, we provide a task. So the granularity here is really fine, but you can see in the documentation a sample of migration, which basically explain how to chain all those calls to the tasks. Now you can test your migration. So at that point, you can use your production content, and it's exactly the same than in the previous migration step. So you will have to choose a test strategy. So either you crawl and you compare the results. You can run acceptance test, fully automated or manual. You can also run a test campaign involving the end users. And if you find any issue, you have to add the corresponding use case to the test repository and go back to step 2 to enrich the version handler. Don't forget to update the bootstrap file, especially the one which contains the configuration and the definition, and also update if you have some samples in your bootstrap. Now you can build and release your project. And you have Magnolia 5 up and running. So what are the next steps? So you can contact us. We have a landing page for the migration. And as I have already described at the beginning of this webinar, we provide 3 different services: an audit on your project, assistance, and workshops. And we will run a dedicated session of a migration workshop during the next conference. So now it's time for the questions. So if you have any questions.
Okay. So our first question is it possible to migrate from the OpenMind Simple Media module to the DAM in Magnolia 5? And I'm going to guess that there's a more specific thrust of can you automatically migrate content from OpenMind Simple Media module into the DAM?
We do not provide any migration task to migrate the content of OpenMind Simple Media to the DAM. Here you have different options. Either you, since it's a third-party module, either you wait for a compatible version in Magnolia 5 of Simple Media, or you write the migration script that will migrate the content. But for that, you can have a look at what we have done for our own migration from the DMS to the DAM. It gives some idea of how to write such migration tasks.
Okay. Are there other questions? Where can I find information about migration from 5.2 to 5.3?
So yeah, it's a very good question. So I have not talked about migration from 5.2 to 5.3 because in that case, it's not really a migration. It's more about an upgrade. So here, what I described is how to migrate to Magnolia 5.3. But if you are already in Magnolia 5.2, you just have to be aware that there is one impact when you upgrade to Magnolia 5.3. We have changed. We have made some changes in the definition of application. So we have a task that you have to call in your version handler to make those changes automatic. And this is described in the change list of Magnolia 5.3.
Okay, our next question is, we've developed custom dialogues with custom save handlers. We know the migration won't be automatic, but can we implement a new save handler in Magnolia 5?
Yes, clearly, this is exactly what you have to do. So you will have to rewrite. So custom dialogues is not an issue. The issue is if you have a custom control in Magnolia 4.5. If you have custom controls in Magnolia 4.5, you will have to recreate the equivalent field in Magnolia 5, or you can also decide to use an existing field in Magnolia 5, so you don't need to create a new one. You will have to, so after that, you will have to explain the migration task, what to do about this new field. So you will have to declare how to migrate the field in Magnolia 4.5 into the corresponding one in Magnolia 5. And this is exactly the same for version handlers. For save handler. So you will have to explain Magnolia during the migration what to do about the save handler in 4.5. To migrate to the corresponding actions in Magnolia 5.
Our next question is, what is the preferred way to replace dialog control MPLS that render JSPs?
So I don't know what is dialog control amps exactly, but maybe you are talking about possibility in Magnolia 4.5 to render a dialog using a GSP or using any template or HTML. So we don't really have this an equivalent in Magnolia 5. What you will have to do if you want to have a similar control is to look at Vaadin and especially don't remember exactly the name, but it's a specific layout in Vaadin which takes an HTML as a template. So you can it's really similar to what we have in Magnolia 4.5.
Okay, our next question is, would it not be better to use a clean 4.5 version and only migrate your custom modules?
Actually, yes. Actually, this is a good question. But actually, the process itself will, when you will run the process at the end, you will have a clean Magnolia 4.5. If you take a Magnolia 4.4 and you run a migration scripts on top of 4.4, you will have a clean Magnolia 4.5. So it does not make sense to start from scratch in Magnolia 4.5 to do the migration directly. It's better to follow the whole process.
We have custom controls. Are we limited to the controls that are available in Vaadin, or can we extend the Vaadin controls as well?
Yes, there is no restriction. You can use any, we have integrated some Vaadin control out of the box in Magnolia, but you can use any existing Vaadin control and you can create your own Vaadin controls as well. We have, for instance, we have a nice demonstration of Google Analytics integrated into Magnolia, which use custom controls that we have built to display charts and graphs in real time. So that's totally feasible. And this is the recommended way as well.
Okay, do we have other questions? With a complex topic like migration, we know that we won't be able to answer everyone's questions during the webinar, and there are almost always questions that will come to your mind once the webinar is complete. So in that case, we'd suggest going to the forums or using some of the other resources that Nicola mentioned. And we have another question. We have another 2 questions. All right, 3. Is Blossom 3 required?
It's a good question. I think you are asking if you are in Magnolia 4.5 or 4.4 using Blossom 2, if you need to upgrade to Blossom 3 in Magnolia 5, I would say yes. Yes, I would say that you will have to use the latest Blossom. But I'm not sure 100%, but I would say yes, just mainly because about the dialogue. As I said, in Magnolia 5, the dialogue layout has changed, and the dialogue builder in Blossom also has changed. So you need to move to the latest Blossom.
Okay, another question. Wouldn't it be possible to migrate directly from 4.4 to 5 and then just migrate the content?
No, it's not feasible from a technical perspective. This migration has to be done in 2 distinct steps. Especially, it's very important to fully validate the first steps. So the result at the end of the migration to Magnolia 4.5 before starting the second step.
Okay, another question. We have a lot of images uploaded in the website. The DMS to DAM migration does the DMS to DAM migration migrate these?
Yes. We have a task that will migrate all assets in your website or in any workspaces in Magnolia to the DAM, but you have to call those tasks explicitly in your module.
Our next question is there a way to automatically migrate the content?
Yes. For the first migration from Magnolia 4.4 to 4.5, we have a task that you have to call to migrate the content. That's all, just one call. And from Magnolia 4.5 to 5, the content itself has not really changed except for the metadata, but you don't have to do anything for that. This is automatically called by the Magnolia core module. But so it's not fully automated. You have to explicitly do this call. It's mainly because we want to give you the control of the migration of your own data and your own module. That's the main reason.
And there's a follow-up to an earlier question. So the person is saying that, and this is referring to the trying to do a migration from either 4.4 straight to 5. They're noting that custom things need to be migrated by hand anyhow, so why can't you just make the migration?
Well, here the question is not clear if we talk about custom content or custom definitions. Well, so if it's about custom content, so I would say that let's take an example that in the website workspace, you have a way to organize Node, which is not the way Magnolia works. So of course, Magnolia won't be able to migrate that, and you will have to do it manually, or at least to automate this through manual call in the version handler. But if you stick on Magnolia practices, in that case, you just need to call a task that will do this job for you.
Okay, our next question. Why will content exported from 4.5 as XML not import into Magnolia 5?
It's a good question. It's mainly because the structure, the definition, the data model has changed between Magnolia 4.5 and 5. Mainly, I mean, the main reason is about the metadata. So as I explained, the metadata in Magnolia 4.5 are under a node called metadata. And in Magnolia 5, the metadata are directly under the corresponding node, so just as a mixin. So this change has an impact on the XML. The XML is not the same, so that's why Magnolia 5 cannot recognize an XML coming from Magnolia 4.5. There are also some changes, small changes, which will make the import of Magnolia 4.5 file impossible in Magnolia 5.
Okay, the next question is, we have reasonably small projects based on the STK with no complex custom modules in 4.5. Do you think that we'll need Magnolia's assistance to migrate to 5.3?
It's very difficult to answer this kind of question. The best way, so as I explained, we provide different levels of help, of services. The first one is what we call an audit. So this is this is through this audit that we can answer clearly this kind of questions. So if you are not sure if you are not sure if a workshop is needed, or if you are not sure if you need assistance or more ad hoc services on your migration, the best way to know that is to first go for an audit.
Okay, we have a follow-up question to an earlier question.
Yeah, the The question is about which task to use to automate the migration of the content. So I don't remember exactly the name of the task, but in the best is that I think that after that session we will provide all the answers that we have done. This is the way we so we will go through all the questions again and provide an answer, and so you will have access to the answers, and I will give the name of the task in the answers.
Okay, continuing thread of questions here. Based on our experience, might it be faster to rebuild an application by scratch and then just to migrate the content?
Sometimes it's a case, yes. It's really case by case. It's very hard I mean, it's difficult to do this assessment. And based on my experience, the best way to know that is to go through an audit first. So with the audit, we are able to identify if it's better to go through the whole process, or it's better to start from scratch.
There's also, just to jump in here for a moment, I think there's also a fairly practical point of where do you want to spend and how should you spend your time? If you have many projects to migrate, then building skills around migration can be a very valuable investment. If you only have one big project to migrate, and say you built it, well, if you're using 4.4, you probably started using Magnolia 4 years ago, and you've likely learned a lot about the system. It might be much better to invest your time in learning Magnolia 5 and re-implement, knowing that the experience you've gained in the last 4 years will help you build a much better system. Okay, more general question here. I'm not sure if we want to handle this inside of migration. The question is about how to create your own templating kit, and I think that's probably something best taken to the forums where people can help you with that. Okay, an excellent question here. Do you plan in the future to provide the tools which fully automate the migration process, not only the content, but everything else? FTL scripts, model classes, metadata, bootstrap files, resources, and so on.
Yes, it's an interesting question. This is not the approach that we have decided to follow. The approach that we prefer is to decompose the migration into very specific tasks and provide you the control of the migration. The main reason is that it's really hard to provide such kind of tools. As you know, Magnolia is a product which can be highly customized, where you can overload most of the behaviors. So from a technical point of view, having such tools mean that only users which are using Magnolia with out-of-the-box features and without any customization will be able to use this tool. All the other which are using customizations, third-party module, they won't be able to use that tool. So that's why we prefer to have something more granular and to give you the control about what to do.
I think to follow up on that briefly, one analogy is if you look at, say, an operating system such as OS X, of course, Apple does a great deal of work on the platform level, but it is very much up to each individual application developer to make their application work with the new version of the platform. This isn't always required. Some applications will run stably from version to version, but many do need some type of update, especially to deal with new features. Magnolia is a platform. It's not as complex as, say, a full operating system, at least a full modern operating system. And each application may have very specific integration needs, especially because they tend to bring in equally complex systems. It's a very difficult path to make a perfectly seamless migration for. Are there additional questions? I'll wait just a moment and see. It's been great to get this much input from people and have people paying such close attention throughout the webinar. So I'll start the wrap up now. If there's a question, feel free to type it in and we can still answer it. So this is the end of the formal content. Thank you very much for attending and asking your questions. I'd also like to thank Nicola for taking time out of his day to help us prepare for this webinar and deliver it. In the next few days, I'll email each of you links to the webinar recording along with slides and a typed version of the questions with a few additional details thrown in for you. If you got additional questions, we'd recommend that you take them to the forum, and hopefully we'll see you at the next Magnolia conference. It's a great way to learn about the ins and outs of migration, and if you've got a very specific question, you can spend some time with our very skilled developer team and get those questions answered. Once again, thank you very much, and we hope to see you for the next webinar.